I was folding tiny onesies in my childhood bedroom when the first contraction hit. It wasn't sharp yet, but deep, like something old and powerful waking up inside me. I glanced at the clock. Almost 10 p.m. Outside, the wind pushed against the old window panes like it wanted in. Inside, the laughter from the living room was loud, polished, artificial. I hadn't planned to give birth in this house. I hadn't planned to come back at all. But when Jacob died 2 months and 3 days ago, crushed beneath a collapsed scaffold at the warehouse, I was 5 months pregnant and out of options. My landlord said he was sorry, but couldn't wait on life insurance. My job, a part-time kindergarten teacher, had no room for maternity leave, so I called my parents. I didn't want to, but I had to. Come back home, my mother had said over the phone. We'll help. For now. She made sure I heard the condition in her voice. It was not love. Not welcome, just pity, neatly folded like the guest towels in the linen closet. My younger sister, Charity, still lived at home by choice. At 28, she was the shining star of the family, the perfect Christian daughter. Engaged to a young preacher. Volunteering at church. Always dressed like a Pinterest board. Our parents adored her. She was proof that their parenting had worked. I was their quiet failure proof that life sometimes writes its own story. I felt another contraction deeper now. I placed my hand on my belly, whispering to the baby. Not yet, I said half to myself. Just give me an hour. Downstairs, music played. The engagement dinner had been moved inside due to the wind. Church friends, board members, and the fiancé's entire family were packed in our living room. Everyone smiling, everyone pretending. I stepped into the hallway, leaning on the banister. Mom, I called softly. Nothing. I called again louder. Mom, I think it's starting. From the bottom of the stairs, she looked up with her wine glass in hand and a frozen smile. Lauren, not now? Charity is giving a toast. But I'm having contractions, real ones. I think we should go to the hospital. She didn't move. Don't start your drama tonight. It's not drama, I said, pressing my back to the wall as another contraction hit sharper. It's labor. My father appeared from the kitchen, frowning. We gave you a place to stay, Lauren, but you don't get to ruin your sister's moment. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I gasped. I just need to go. I need help. You couldn't wait, he snapped. It's just like you, always needing attention. I took a step down the stairs, gripping the rail. Charity stepped into the hallway, then wearing a white lace dress and soft curls. She looked like something from a bridal catalog. And the moment she saw me, her mouth curled. You always do this, she said, her voice sweet and deadly. You always find a way to steal the spotlight. I'm in labor, I whispered, but my voice broke. Charity turned to Dad. She's going to scream and cry in front of Pastor Ethan's parents. She's going to make a scene. My father didn't say a word. He walked up the stairs toward me. I tried to step back, but the wall was behind me. You've already embarrassed us enough, he said, his jaw tight. Then he grabbed my arm hard and pulled. I lost balance. My legs buckled. Dad, stop, please, I said, breathless. But he didn't. He dragged me down the stairs by my wrist first, and when I tripped on the bottom rug, he grabbed my hair. My scalp burned. My knees hit the tile. Somewhere behind me, I heard my mother say through clenched teeth, She's screaming. She's gonna ruin everything. Out, Dad hissed. You want to act like trash? Go give birth like it. He flung the front door open. The cold hit my skin like a slap. My body curled instinctively, trying to protect the baby. He dragged me out onto the porch and let go. I collapsed, sobbing. One hand over my belly. One knee scraped raw, my breath visible in the air. I looked up just in time to see Charity standing in the doorway sipping champagne. That's why nobody loves you, she said, smiling. And then the door slammed shut. I was alone, in labor, in the cold, outside my own home. The cold sank into my bones before I could even move. My dress was too thin. I hadn't worn shoes. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely hold myself up. I crawled to the porch railing and tried to pull myself up, but another contraction crashed through me and I dropped back down with a sob. I could hear the music through the door. Laughter. Glasses clinking. Someone was giving a speech. Charity's fiancé, probably. A perfect man with perfect words. I was shaking on the porch, bleeding into the cracks of the wood. The pain twisted around my spine like a hot wire. I bit into my sleeve to keep from screaming. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Time didn't mean anything anymore. My breath fogged the air. My body curled around itself like a dying animal. I thought I might pass out. I thought I might lose the baby. I kept whispering his name, the name I hadn't told anyone. Isaac. Out of nowhere, a pair of headlights swung across the yard. A small car pulled into the driveway next door Mrs. Hendrick's house. She'd been in a nursing home for months. Someone must be renting the place now. The car idled for a moment, then the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. Mid-30s, long coat, tired eyes. She had a hospital badge clipped to her sweater. She paused when she saw me. Her expression changed instantly from distracted to sharp. "Ma'am," she said, walking quickly across the lawn. "Are you okay?" I tried to speak, but couldn't. I just nodded toward my stomach, breath catching. "Oh my God. Are you in labor?" I nodded again, eyes full of tears. She dropped her bag, knelt beside me, and took my hand without hesitation. It was warm, solid, real. "I'm Grace," she said gently. "I'm a nurse. Can you stand? We need to get you in the car." She didn't wait for permission. She hooked one arm under mine, the other around my waist, and somehow between contractions we made it to her passenger seat. She turned the heat on full blast, took off her coat and wrapped it around my legs. As she started the car, I caught one last glimpse of my house. The curtain in the living room was cracked open just enough for me to see my mother watching. She didn't come out. She didn't even wave. Grace noticed my stare. She followed my gaze to the house. "Family?" she asked quietly. I nodded once. "They let you sit out here like this?" Another nod. Grace didn't speak for a while. She kept one hand on the wheel, the other reaching over to squeeze mine. "I saw the way he pulled you," she said finally, her voice trembling. "He could have killed you. He could have killed your baby." I didn't answer. I couldn't. All I could do was cry, quietly. The kind of cry that doesn't make noise, just breaks you in pieces. We reached the county hospital in under 15 minutes. Grace parked crooked near the emergency entrance, threw on her hazard lights, and ran to get help. 2 nurses and an orderly came rushing with a wheelchair. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. They placed monitors on my belly, checked my vitals, started an IV. I was 7 centimeters dilated. The baby was coming soon. Everything felt like a blur after that. Lights, beeping, a nurse with freckles holding my hand, someone putting a mask on me. Grace never left the room. She stayed until the baby arrived, even when they told her she didn't have to. She held my hand and told me when to breathe. Isaac was born at 3:16 a.m. He came into the world crying loud and strong fists, clenched eyes wide like his father's. He had a full head of dark hair and a birthmark on his shoulder that looked like a tiny star. When they placed him on my chest, I didn't cry. Not right away. I was too stunned, too grateful, too numb. But later, after they cleaned him up and placed him in the bassinet beside me, Grace pulled up a chair and sat down. She didn't say much, just watched him sleep. And then I whispered it more to myself than to her. "Do you think I deserve that?" She turned to me slowly, eyes steady. "Nobody who deserves pain asks if they do," she said softly. I closed my eyes and let her words wash over me. Because deep down, I had believed it. That I'd done something wrong. That I'd failed as a daughter, a sister, a human. But in that moment, I felt something shift. Maybe I hadn't failed. Maybe I just survived. When the nurse came in to check on us, Grace stood up. She told me she'd stop by the next morning before her shift. And she did. Every day. She brought granola bars and fresh socks from the hospital gift shop. She swaddled Isaac when my arms trembled from exhaustion. She never asked questions that hurt. She just stayed. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I didn't call my mother. I didn't respond to the voicemails from my dad. I didn't text Charity back. The silence at first felt like drowning, but then it started to feel like breathing. They let me stay in the hospital for 3 nights. Technically, there were no medical complications. Isaac was healthy, I was stable. But when I asked the nurse if I could remain a bit longer, just until I figured out where to go, she didn't hesitate. She just nodded and said, "We'll take care of you until then." The hospital room was small with pale green walls and a narrow window that looked out to the staff parking lot. But to me, it felt like sanctuary. It was the first place in months where I wasn't afraid to fall asleep. Grace came every morning before her shift started, always with something in her bag: a small banana muffin, a fresh burp cloth, a knitted hat one of her church friends had made for newborns. She never stayed long, 10, maybe 15 minutes. But those few minutes were everything. She never asked about my parents, never questioned why I didn't have anyone else visiting. She didn't look at me with pity or pressure. She simply acted like I belonged there, like I deserved care even if no one else thought so. On the second morning, she brought a stuffed elephant for Isaac. It had floppy ears and a little stitched smile. I held it for a long time before placing it beside him in the bassinet. "He'll like that," I said softly. "When he's old enough. I think he already does." Grace smiled. That day I found the courage to ask her something that had been sitting in my chest like a stone. "What do people do when they have nowhere to go?" Grace didn't answer right away. She looked at me long and carefully, like she was weighing something deeper than logistics. Then she said, "They go where people still believe in second chances." She reached into her bag again and handed me a small brochure. The front was faded, the corners soft from handling. It read, "St. Mary's Shelter for Women and Children." "It's not fancy," she said almost apologetically. "But it's kind, safe. I volunteer there twice a month. They know me. I can put in a call." I took the brochure with trembling fingers. Just holding it made me feel more human. That night, after feeding Isaac and tucking the elephant near his tiny shoulder, I whispered to him, "We're going to start over. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe." When the discharge papers were ready the next morning, Grace was already there. She helped me carry the bag they'd packed for me: diapers, formula samples, a small blanket. Instead of calling a cab, she drove us herself. I don't remember much of the ride, just the soft hum of the heater, the way the trees blurred by, and the steady comfort of Isaac sleeping on my chest. The shelter sat at the end of a narrow road half hidden behind a faded white church. It wasn't impressive from the outside: old bricks, crooked mailbox, a porch swing that leaned left. But when we stepped inside, the warmth hit me instantly. The woman at the front desk greeted Grace with a hug. Then she looked at me, not with judgment, not with pity, but with calm recognition, like she'd seen dozens of women arrive just like me. She asked for my name, then asked Isaac's, then said the words that cracked something open in my chest. "We're glad you're here." She gave me a room shared but quiet, a twin bed with a soft blanket, a dresser, a crib pushed against the wall. Nothing fancy. But to me, it felt like everything I'd lost and didn't think I'd find again. That night, after feeding Isaac and rocking him to sleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the night on the porch. I didn't wonder what my mother was doing or if Charity had posted more pictures from her engagement. Instead, I listened to Isaac breathing, and for the first time in a long time, I believed we might be okay. Life at the shelter was quieter than I expected. Not silent, but tender, like someone had turned the volume down on the world, just enough to let the pain breathe, without breaking you. There were 5 other women staying in the upstairs dorms when I arrived. One was a college dropout. Another was a grandmother raising her grandchild after her daughter disappeared. One woman didn't speak at all, she just knitted and watched the news on mute. And across from me on the bunk near the window was Tanya, a mother of 2, who had escaped a man who used to lock her in the laundry room for days. None of us asked too many questions, but we nodded at each other, passed the sugar quietly, took turns watching kids so the others could shower. There was no pity, no judgment, just shared understanding. And in that quiet space, I began to breathe again. In the early mornings before Isaac woke, I would stand by the window and watch the sun creep across the parking lot. Sometimes I'd press my hand to the glass, just to feel something real, something cold. It reminded me I was still here. The first letter from my mother came exactly 9 days after I left the hospital. It was short, a single sheet of thick paper folded neatly in an envelope with no return address. "We're worried sick. You've embarrassed the whole family. If you don't return soon, your room will be cleared and given to someone who actually contributes. No mention of Isaac. Not a word about the baby. Just shame disguised as concern. I didn't respond. 2 days later, another letter came. Then a third. Each one colder than the last. One of the volunteers at the shelter, Margaret, an older woman who used to teach accounting before her husband drank their savings away, offered to help me open a bank account. She showed me how to track expenses, stretch grocery cards, and apply for financial aid. "You're not broken," she told me one night while folding towels. "You're just starting from the bottom. That's not shameful. That's strategic." Her words stuck with me. So did Grace's. So I made a plan. First, I found a part-time job at a diner across town. They let me work late nights washing dishes in the back, and they didn't mind me wearing Isaac in a carrier while I worked. I walked 40 minutes each way through the snow, some nights my boots soaked through and my hands numb. But the rhythm of rinsing plates, the clatter of silverware, the warmth of grease and coffee, it grounded me. During the day, I started studying for my GED. I borrowed old test prep books from the shelter's small library. Tanya quizzed me on math formulas while her twins built pillow forts. Sometimes I read science passages aloud to Isaac, who liked the sound of my voice even if he didn't understand a word. I applied for every program I could find, free coding boot camps, workforce training, anything that would let me learn and still be with Isaac. I got rejected. A lot. But then one night after a shift at the diner, I checked my email and saw it. "Congratulations. You've been accepted into the Elevate Tech Apprenticeship. On-site childcare available. Training begins January 15th. I stared at the screen for so long that Margaret thought something was wrong. Then I laughed, loud and real and wild. It was the first time I had laughed like that since Jacob died. In the months that followed, I kept moving, kept learning, kept showing up. The letters from my parents eventually stopped, but the voicemails kept coming. One from my father. "You can't hold a grudge forever. It's childish." Another from Charity. "You ruined my engagement, you know. The church is still talking about that night. I had to reschedule with Pastor Ethan's family 3 times, all because of your drama." And then came the voicemail that made my stomach twist. "You should be grateful we didn't call the cops. That's still our house. You had no right to bleed all over our porch like that." I remember standing in the hallway holding my phone like it was radioactive. My breath caught in my throat. Tanya looked up from her cot. "You okay?" I wasn't. But I nodded, because something had shifted inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Something colder, something sharper. I stopped crying about what they did, and I started documenting it. I started writing everything down: dates, names, quotes, photos, who was present. I saved voicemails, took screenshots, created folders on a flash drive I wore around my neck like a necklace. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth to have a shape, a timeline, a spine. So if the day ever came when they denied what they did, I wouldn't have to argue. I would simply show them what silence looks like when it learns to speak. The tech apprenticeship started in January, during the coldest winter the city had seen in years. The building was old, but modernized, a converted warehouse with clean glass doors and steel beams painted white. Inside, a classroom with long tables, donated laptops, and a corner filled with toys and foam mats for kids. That's where Isaac stayed during lessons supervised by volunteers who treated him like their own. The first time I dropped him off, he clung to my sweater. His tiny fists trembled. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "We're doing this for both of us." He didn't understand, but somehow, I think he knew. The program was intense, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I was exhausted. Some nights I stayed up reading documentation while Isaac slept beside me. Other nights I didn't even make it to the bed, I just fell asleep at the table with my head on the keyboard. But it felt different than before. This wasn't survival. It was building. I stopped checking my phone for messages from home. I stopped flinching every time a car slowed down near the shelter. I stopped wondering what they were saying about me. I just worked. And slowly, my world began to change. By spring, I had moved into a small one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The paint was chipped, the windows stuck, but it was mine. I bought a secondhand couch, a mini fridge, and a used crib. Someone listed online for $20. I hung Isaac's drawings on the fridge with dollar store magnets. I labeled the Tupperware with sticky notes because he liked colors and shapes. He started walking, then talking. His first word wasn't mama or dada. It was safe. I don't know where he picked it up, but when I heard it, I cried harder than I had in months. We were still poor, still counting change sometimes, but we were no longer scared. There's a difference. I kept the flash drive close. Every voicemail, every letter, every medical note from the hospital. I even had a copy of the intake report from the shelter the night I arrived, filed by Grace herself, noting visible bruising, high-stress dehydration, active labor. It wasn't about revenge. It was about memory. Because memory, when organized and named, becomes armor. I told no one about the flash drive, not even Grace. I just carried it in my bag near my ID and Isaac's immunization card. Quiet. Ready. On Isaac's first birthday, I posted a photo on social media. Just me and him sitting on a bench in a park. No caption, no location, no tags. But they saw it. I knew because 37 minutes later, a message popped up in my inbox. From Charity. Still trying to look like a saint. So fake. You've always had a victim complex. I didn't reply, but I stared at the message for a long time. Because it confirmed what I suspected they were watching. Not caring, just watching. Waiting to be proven right. Waiting for me to fail. So I made a quiet vow. They would never get that satisfaction. By the time Isaac turned 2, I was working full-time for a small software company that took a chance on me after the apprenticeship. The pay was modest but steady, enough to stop living shift to shift. I enrolled Isaac in preschool 3 days a week. He made friends, brought home finger paintings, learned to say please and thank you. We celebrated holidays alone, just the two of us. But they were sweet, small, sincere. We made our own traditions. I cooked pancakes on Christmas Eve. He gave me drawings wrapped in paper towels. I hung them on the wall like masterpieces. I stopped wondering if my parents would ever apologize. I stopped needing them to. But I didn't forget. Some nights after Isaac was asleep and the house was quiet, I would plug in the flash drive and review the timeline I'd built. A digital journal folder by folder, line by line, the texts, the recordings, the letters, and the photo. That single photo, taken by someone, probably a guest that night of the engagement party. A blurry shot quickly deleted from social media, but not before someone saved it and sent it to me anonymously. It showed the porch, Charity standing inside the doorway in her white dress, champagne in hand, and me, collapsed outside on the steps holding my stomach, my face pale, my mouth open mid-scream. She was smiling in the photo, laughing. I saved it as memory.jpg. That picture became the anchor of the entire file, not because I wanted to expose her, but because I wanted to remind myself of who I had become. The girl in that photo was dying in pieces. The woman behind the camera, me now, was documenting resurrection. I didn't post it. I didn't send it to anyone. But I knew when the time came I would use it. Not for vengeance, but for truth. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the past came calling again. I was in the break room at work sipping vending machine coffee while Isaac sat under the table with his trains humming softly. We had a little routine. I'd bring him in on shorter days and let him play near my desk. My coworkers never minded. They said he made the office warmer. Outside, the sky was gray. March wind pressed against the windows. I was scrolling through a tutorial video when the receptionist leaned in. "There's a man on the phone asking for you," she said. Said it's urgent. I hadn't heard my father's voice in over 3 years, but I recognized it instantly. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He went straight in. "Your sister's in trouble," he said. I stayed silent. "She's at the hospital. She had a breakdown. Bad one. We've been trying to reach you for hours." Still, I didn't respond. "Your mother's a mess," he added softer now. "She kept saying your name, said Charity needed you, that you're the only one who could." He trailed off, waiting for something from me. I gave him nothing. Eventually, he sighed. "I thought maybe you'd be mature enough to put the past behind you. Guess I was wrong." Click. I didn't say a single word the entire call. 10 minutes later, a text came from an unknown number. It's me, Charity, please. I see it now. I see what I didn't. Please come. I stared at the screen. For 1 second, just one, I felt something crack open. The old ache, the almost forgiveness. But then I remembered. I remembered the way her champagne glass glinted in the porch light. I remembered her laugh as I bled on the steps. I remembered the voicemail about ruining her future and bleeding on the porch like an animal. And I remembered Isaac's first breath taken without family, without flowers, without a single person in that room who shared my blood. I opened my messages, typed slowly. You told me I ruined everything. I don't want to ruin your recovery. Then I turned off my phone for a week. The silence was heavy, but not unbearable. It was chosen. Isaac and I made waffles that Sunday. I let him pour the syrup himself, even though he made a mess. We watched cartoons on the couch. We folded laundry together. He matched socks with serious concentration. I didn't think about the hospital. I didn't wonder how Charity was doing. I didn't ask myself whether I should feel guilty. But the messages didn't stop. Eventually, my mother reached out directly. A long email, the kind only she could write, flawless grammar, impeccable punctuation laced with passive-aggressive regret. She said they had been confused during that time. Said Charity had been under a lot of pressure. Said they weren't perfect parents, but they tried their best. And buried halfway through the email like it was nothing was this line, "We're selling the house." The buyer asked if you'd be willing to stop by and sign something for the family records. Your birth certificate is framed in the study. That sentence hit harder than anything else. They were selling the house. The house, the one I bled on, the one I was dragged out of, the one where no one opened the door, not even when I screamed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat beside Isaac's bed and watched him breathe, arms curled around his stuffed elephant. He looked so peaceful, so far removed from the place that almost destroyed us both. And I thought, if I go back, it has to be on my terms. I wasn't the girl on the porch anymore. I was the woman who survived her. I arrived just before sunset. The old house looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had grown. Maybe time and pain and silence had stretched me into something that no longer fit inside that frame. I wore a black coat, simple flats, no makeup. I didn't bring Isaac. This wasn't a family visit. It was a farewell. The porch still creaked underfoot. The same mat was there, the one I tripped on 3 years ago, the one that caught under my heel and sent me sprawling. I looked down at it for a long time before stepping over it. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, lips pressed into a line. She looked thinner, more tired. Her hair was streaked with silver now, but still pinned neatly. She glanced behind me, almost disappointed that I was alone. You came, she said, like she wasn't quite sure whether to be relieved or nervous. I'm here for the certificate, I said. Nothing more. Inside the house was cold. Not temperature-wise, just cold. The air felt hollow. The walls seemed bare, stripped of pictures and life. I noticed several boxes stacked near the stairs. My father stood in the hallway, arms crossed. He didn't say a word. He just nodded once curtly and looked away. And then I saw Charity. She was sitting on the bottom step in sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. No makeup, hair unwashed. Her eyes were rimmed in red. She didn't meet my gaze. My mother gestured toward the study. We framed it. You know, she said, voice too bright. Your birth certificate. Thought you might want it. I followed her down the narrow hallway. The study looked just as I remembered, books lined in perfect order, a painting of a church above the fireplace. And there on the far wall hung the frame. A white matting, dark oak wood glass polished clean. Inside it, my full name, time of birth weight. My father's signature. I stared at it for a long time. Then I asked softly, why did you want me to have this? For the new owners, my mother said. They asked for any original family documentation. We thought you might want a keepsake. I turned to face her. A keepsake. Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't respond. I stepped forward, lifted the frame gently off the wall, and placed it on the desk. I opened my bag. From it, I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't the certificate. It was the photograph. The one someone had sent me years ago. The blurry, damning photo. Charity in her engagement dress standing in the doorway, laughing. Me in the foreground collapsed on the porch, mid-contraction, one hand over my belly. I carefully slid the photo into the frame, removed the certificate, closed the backing. Then I turned and hung it back on the wall. My mother's face went pale. My father stepped forward. "What is that?" "The truth," I said. Charity rose from the stairs slowly like her legs were full of sand. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. "Why would you leave that behind?" "Because silence is the loudest thing you'll ever hear," I replied. "And I want every stranger who walks through this house to hear it." Nobody moved. I took the certificate, folded it carefully, and placed it in my bag. Then I walked past them through the hallway, out the door. None of them followed me. None of them called out. I stepped off the porch and down the path, my boots crunching softly in the gravel. The wind picked up and I wrapped my coat tighter. Before getting into my car, I turned once more to look at the house. The windows glowed softly with fading light. It looked like any ordinary house. But I knew what lived inside those walls. And now so would everyone else. That night, I didn't tell Isaac where I had gone. Instead, we sat on the floor and built a fort out of chairs and blankets. He brought his stuffed elephant and whispered that it needed a cave for thinking. I asked him how many turtles he thought could fit in the sky if we counted them like stars. He laughed. That sound-light hole, untouched by everything I'd endured, was the only legacy I ever wanted. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their approval. What I needed, I already had. A boy with a soft laugh, a quiet life, and a memory framed in wooden truth left behind like a signature I never needed to forge. Weeks passed after I visited the house. No more emails, no more voicemails, just silence. But this time it didn't feel like exile. It felt like peace. Isaac and I settled deeper into our rhythm. Mornings filled with cereal and cartoons, afternoons with work and walks to the park, evenings with soft music and bedtime stories. I didn't talk about the past much. Not because I was afraid of it, but because I didn't want it to take up more room than it already had. The pain had taught me something. But it didn't deserve a permanent seat at the table. Sometimes when I walked Isaac to preschool, other parents would smile, politely nod in that quiet way grown-ups do when they sense a story they don't need the details of. And I would smile back, because I no longer needed anyone to know. It was enough that I had survived it. Every so often I'd take out the birth certificate, still folded neatly untouched since that day. I kept it in a drawer beneath a pile of sketches Isaac had drawn, mostly monsters, suns with sunglasses, and stick figure castles. The certificate no longer felt like proof of who I came from. It felt like proof of who I wasn't anymore. One afternoon, as I was sorting laundry, Isaac padded into the room and held up a crumpled piece of paper. On it was a drawing of a house with two stick figures out front, one big, one small. "That's us," he said proudly. "You and me. That's our home." I kneeled beside him and ran my fingers along the lines of the roof, the crooked windows, the smiling faces. "It's perfect," I said. "Do you think it'll stay forever?" he asked. I didn't rush to answer, because the truth is, homes aren't always places. Sometimes they're people, and sometimes they're just the silence you fought hard to reclaim. I think as long as we have each other, I said it'll stay in our hearts, even if the walls change. He nodded solemnly, the way only a 4-year-old can, and then ran off to tape the drawing to the fridge. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the lights blink across the city skyline. Isaac was asleep, curled up in bed, one hand on his stuffed elephant. And I thought about everything. The porch, the cold, the dragging pain, the people who chose silence when they could have chosen kindness. And I thought about the others, the ones who had no reason to help me but did anyway. Grace, Tanya, Margaret, the women at the shelter who gave me a bed without asking for a story. I used to believe silence was something you were sentenced to. Now I understand it can be something you choose, a quiet refusal, a steady boundary, a declaration. You do not get to rewrite me. Some pain doesn't need revenge. It needs absence, distance, growth. They will tell their version of the story someday. Maybe they already have. Maybe in their version I was difficult, dramatic, ungrateful. But I don't need to correct it because I know the truth. And so does Isaac. And one day when he's old enough, I'll tell him all of it. Not to make him hate anyone, not to make myself look strong, but to teach him what it means to love someone without conditions, and what it means to walk away when that love is never returned. Because strength isn't always the person who shouts the loudest. Sometimes strength is the woman who says nothing and builds a new life anyway.